back at Benel, do you have things on speaker view?
Yes, we are good.
Okay, marvelous. Well, welcome everyone to Inspiration and Adaptation, an ongoing conversation produced by Benel Street Art Center to explore how creatives are adapting in these times. Benel is situated within the tribal lands of Mitchiltana, Ninilchik village tribe, whose descendants trace their roots from the ancient Ketchimak people, the Dena'ina and Sukliak people of this region, who sustained these lands since time immemorial. I'm Asia Freeman, Artistic Director of Benel Street Art Center, and today I'm speaking with Simonetta Mignano, owner and operator of Bivy in Anchorage, and artists Hollis Mickey, Susan Scher, and Ben Huff about their art and the mission of this gallery and bookstore and home of the School of Nonfunctional Studies situated in Anchorage. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
I'm really pleased that you could take time to join us. So Bivy's a contemporary art space, I understand, founded in 2017 in Alaska on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina. And Bivy's been presenting exhibits featuring the work of local and international artists. Simonetta, I would love for you to tell us a bit about how you came to be in Anchorage, because I understand you're originally from Italy, and how you basically chose the location and the vision, how you built this vision for Bivy.
Hi, Aja, thank you for the invitation, and thank you, Ben, Susan, and Hollis for being here. Yeah, I was born and raised in Italy, and I moved to Alaska in 2016 because my partner is from Alaska. And after a while in Italy, we decided to settle here. And I'm an artist and curator, and I mostly work in participatory practices using various mediums. And when I came to Anchorage, I don't know, I felt like it was kind of like a bold sort of spontaneous decision. Just the thought of opening an art gallery, if I rationalize it, seems crazy to me. So I feel like it was rather spontaneous in many ways. Obviously, there is a vision that has been informed by my experiences and my practice. That's how I came to Anchorage.
Wow, that's fascinating. We don't, hear too often of an artist curator moving from Italy, and that's fascinating. Could you just tell us a little bit about your artistic practice and curatorial practice before you started it in Anchorage, just to give us some background?
Yeah, I've been part of this art collective and publishing house called the Industria, which has a long history of working with participatory practices, socially engaged art, and other engaged process. So kind of my main school for 10 years was that, and as a member, as a person that was working there. And then I worked at contemporary art galleries in Rome, kind of more white cube sort of situations. And so that was another piece. I think that the idea of Bivy was going very much hand in hand with this idea of wanting to build a place that is based on purpose and process, very process oriented. And I'm not really good at talking about myself, but I could talk about Bivy better, I think.
Absolutely. Even in a name, like when I think of a Bivy, of course, I just think of this really small, temporary outdoor structure, like when you're bivouacking and you're on expedition. So I'm curious about the name and the location and that identity that you're building with that title.
That's right. In fact, you might be the first person that mentioned that. I think that your Yeah, you're correct. We had this little bivouac sack, and we thought, oh, that's so funny and cute when you say Bivy, and just went for it. And I think, uh, without putting too much weight on the name, but I think that when you're bivouacking, there is a sense of process of rather situationistic, but but also uh, of connection. And
Yeah,
yeah.
I love that. I mean, and I also really like that in a way you didn't obligate yourself to some kind of permanence, and that you engaged, like the idea of an excursion or an experiment, which I think is at the heart of a really vital, artistic and curatorial practice. And so, I just love that name. I think it's fantastic. Tell us a little bit about the location itself and how you came to be in the specific space that you are, and describe it if you would.
Yeah, so we're on G Street, downtown Anchorage, and it's a fairly small space. And in a building that, at least from the inside, it looks very much like an East Coast place to me, because it has kind of tall windows and has hardwood floor, has a different vibe than many places that I've seen here. And, I was looking for a place, and I wanted a place that, quite frankly, was inexpensive and small. And when I saw it, I think it's 700 square feet or something. And when I saw it, it was giant for my, for what I was looking for. So I felt like it was very big. But then, yeah, I bumped into this space and I really liked it, and cleaned it up for about 2 or 3 months, a rather long time. And then we opened.
And how did you have a mission when you opened? Did you set out with a specific intent for the type of work or the artist that you would?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think that our direction at BV is to juxtapose conceptual art and craft through exhibitions, performances, and other participatory practices. Obviously, this vision, this mission, it became clearer with time. The more you do things, the more you just kind of like understand that that's what your voice, uh, in a kind of enlarged sense. And so I think I wasn't necessarily there when I opened, but like I had kind of that feeling. Um, and I've been to Alaska before moving to Alaska, and I, checked out places and kind of gathered like a very superficial sense, if you will, for the art scene here. But I noticed that there was a lot of craft in museums and galleries, and I wasn't necessarily used to see that much craft in exhibited. And in fact, I was thought that would have been outlandish in a white cube situation to put something like that. And that's why I wanted to do it, because I thought it was just counter, this isn't the right term, counterproductive, but like to not have that amazing craft and conceptual work together in a dialogical process, because I think it brings together also perhaps different people and to the conversation. Obviously the conversation happens through the art of the artists, but based on what kind of things you do, you have different people coming in the space. And I think that at least my experiences in Europe, like there wasn't a lot of that, if not none, places that would place together conceptual work with craft.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to talk with each of these artists, Alice, Susan, and Ben, about how they fit into that juxtaposition that you described. But could you just take a moment to sort of define or elucidate what you're thinking of as craft versus concept in this context?
Well, that is a huge question, which I'm not sure that we have time to unfold and I'm not sure that and in fact, I'm sure that I do not have like a full answer to it. But well, craft is a lot of things. I think that what we're putting on show at Bivy is intentional craft, so to speak, meaning that if tomorrow I, make some pottery at my house, likely they're not gonna go at Bivy. But like if a person, an artist with intention, go and produce something and make something that is more craft oriented, so it's more not necessarily so rooted in the idea like conceptual art, so the execution is important, the mastery is important. Well, that's craft. But like there's can be so many things, and I think we have artists here, many Hollis and Susan Manhaf, that can help inform this answer. But yeah, definitely interested in that conversation.
Great. Well, let's see if we can sort of tease that out in the context of like looking inside Bivy. And I know you've prepared some images which you'll describe for us too, but if you'd like to share some, and then we can maybe
Totally.
dive in, that'd be wonderful.
So yeah,
Right.
as we said, we opened in 2017 and we had a fair amount of shows. Actually, it was 2020 during this stall. We had time to reflect and think back and say, oh, it was perhaps good that we didn't keep going for a while. It was just recorral, regather ourselves. But anyways, yeah, we had exhibitions like showing the work of artists from Alaska or based in Alaska, and international artists, for instance, local artists. We had a show about long labor intensive work of Jimmy Riordan, where he printed this book, and it's called Le Roman du Lièvre, and it's been this overarching project of his, and he's a known artist in Alaska. And and so this show had all these lead balls laying on the ground at Bivy. So that, I think that in some ways was a show about participation. Jimmy is not stranger to participatory art processes, but also about craft. Then, for example, we can look at a show with an Italian artist. Ionian Archaeological Archives was the name of the show, and is a emerging Italian artist. And the way he works a lot with like materials that and ideas that are rooted in his history as a Sicilian. And so we treated the space as if it was a new archaeological site. And as you can see, there's a photograph here that shows a bunch of ceramic sort of fish skins and shells and things like that hanging on these slender support systems. And so that is definitely like a work that body of work that, yes, is based on an idea, but it's heavily involved in, a process that it relates to being able to work with ceramic. Trying to proceed at a better speed, but we recently, last year, we had this show with these artists, Aquastrated World. They're well-known artists working in participatory art processes, mostly engaging with performers and non-performers, with a lot of people in their body of work. And they're interested in the theme of not knowing and what we can do all together, not knowing, and what we can do with that in the room. And so this show called Using Feelings to Get Rid of Feelings, that we had basically installed last year for the entire year because of COVID, obviously. It was this really interesting participatory installation and a performance that involved the participation of local performers and non-performers. So these artists that originally from Australia came here, and over the course of 2 weeks worked with us and local performers to put together a performance. And yeah, then we had like, we often have group exhibitions as well. For instance, the one we're looking at is called Snow Days, and had Michael Conti, John Coyne, Steven Saizuski, and these are, and Emma Scheffer, these are all Alaska based. And then Philippe Tronier and Rebecca Tollens, he's Swiss and she's Swedish. And this show is about winter sports, and it was really a mix of different outlook at winter sports. But again, thinking about, you know, some art was more craft heavy, so quote unquote, and some other was more conceptual. Again, as I said at the beginning, we do a lot of shows that, or at least we try to have social engagement component. And this one was a show that we had in the summer of 2019. It's called To Each His Own. And it was about personal collection, memorabilia, inheritance. And many people were so interested in the show, and we got to show their personal collection. For instance, here we're looking at a rather, I don't know, surreal image of a collection of screens of Donna Carr that we kind of put in the space, one behind the other, all stashed, and really, really, really amazing. The Alaska Botanical Garden gave us their collection of slides of perennials. We had various collection for anonymous people. We did a conversation. We hosted a conversation about personal collections, and we still keep uploading this personal collection on our website. So again, if we look at the mission, this is one of these projects that are more aimed in social engagement. We're looking at an image here of the show of last year that I briefly mentioned before, using feelings to get rid of feelings, and Hobbes Opera was one part of the other part of that exhibition, which involved participation of performers and non-performers. So you see here in the photo, like a guitar that has 7, okay, I'm missing the word in English for this part of the guitar. The
neck.
Exactly, 7 necks. Yeah. And you see like Queen Christopherson and Justin Ferguson playing with non-musicians, and it was this communal endeavor of knowing and not knowing and playing, and very process oriented. This is another image of a show called A Note Upon the Mystic Writing Pad by Emma Scheffer, where visitors were invited to erase the drawings that she made. And every time the drawing was completely erased, Emma would come back during open hours or the weekends or nights, and she would redraw the piece of art. People really loved being able to, quote unquote, destroy the art piece. It was, in the case of kids, was endearing to watch. They were really excited. So again, participatory art projects. And then here we have, for instance, another show called Workwear. And it was a show about work and labor in general. And it was with Hollis Mickey, Amy Messner, Karen Lowell, Guido Segni, and Juan Sandoval. I'll leave like Hollis, I put a photograph of Hollis's performance Workwear, so I'll leave it to her to say a few words about her performance. But again, this was an example of a show where there is combination of artists that work with conceptual art and craft. I think in the case of Hollis, she works with both, for instance. Yeah, so you see like a series of aprons that Hollis should talk more about because they're really tied to her art process. And for instance, we're seeing an installation of a art piece called The Mindful Laziness 5-Year Plan, where the artist is delegating part of his art process, his artwork, to a AI machine that he educated so he can take, as you can see in the screen, a rest, a nap for 5 years, which is also very interesting to bring this kind of conversation, because I think one overarching thing that we're interested in, and it's definitely a foundation also of the School of Nonfunctional Studies, is resisting to the sort of extent that we can capitalist structures and oppressive systems. And when we talk about the School of Functional Studies, Hollis and I can tell you more about it. But Hollis, would you like to say something about this performance that you did?
Sure, I can be really brief, just sensitive to time. But the aprons are, I wear an apron for every major project. So those aprons represent my work from 2010 or so forward. And they're the same brand of apron that I've been able to acquire over time. So they sort of hold the residue of the labor of the major projects and performances that I create. And then the performance for the show, Workwear, I used a set of manuals, management for dummies, things like that, and invited participants, kind of like a tarot deck, to select a page at random, present a work question that they had, that they were thinking about their work life, and then I created a redacted poem for them from that page, and then read that poem aloud in this microphone setup, which you can see. And when people were not engaging with that activity, I was following workout videos in high heels in the small sort of niche space that Bivy has as some delightful architectural character.
Thank you, Hollis. Then again, other example of exhibits that we had, this was with an Israeli artist, Alona Rode, and the show was called I Wear My Sunglasses at Night, and featured a series of canvases made with high visibility materials, and there was a system of LED lights powered with an Arduino that would light them. And so there was this kind of magical but also club-like atmosphere.
So the lights are going through some sort of timed intervals, these LED lights that kind of change the sort of personality of the space.
Yes, exactly. It was just because these canvases are made with high visibility materials, and so therefore they're not necessarily that super bright at all times, but like depends with the kind of light that they have as you see them. And so this Arduino was programmed to make the light go on and off at a certain rhythm, and it would create an atmosphere where the canvases were bright. And this is, for instance, an artist that is very interested, is a conceptual artist, but like she then works a lot with materials, and in particular with high visibility material. Yeah, I don't know if I'm proceeding too fast, Asia, or how things are going. And usually I can be a little tricky with visuals, but like also audio. Just let me know if there's anything.
It's good. Yeah, let's take about maybe about 5 more minutes to look at the main slides here.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just gonna briefly say that we, in occasional shows, often produce a release, or the artist releases ephemera or little publications or posters and things like that. Here we're looking at an image of the bookstore, very tiny bookstore that we have, where we feature publications of different kinds, mostly artist books and zines by local artists and international artists. And you can see that there is this wallpaper, which is in fact, probably the real amusement, the real sensation of the gallery, because many people came in just to look at the wallpaper because it's from the 40s or the 30s or something like that, and people really loved it. So yeah,
I love
so
how you've used it. You kind of employed it as a backdrop throughout your
exactly
presentation. I'm sure some people were wondering, why in the heck does she have this really like florid, old looking?
yeah.
but I love that as a framing device for your whole talk. So you're saying that draws people in.
Yeah, I mean, there was like a mention on the Dena'ina at one point that was just focusing basically on the wallpaper. And so people were like just passing by the main exhibition page and just go and look at the wallpaper. I love that kind of approach to. So I think there's I just want to make sure that the artists have time to share their work. So you want to talk the school at the end maybe, or
That's a good idea. I like that. Let's do that. We'll come back to the School of Nonfunctional Studies, and at this point, just pick up Hollis in particular, kind of dive a little bit more in, if you will. And Hollis, I just want to acknowledge by way of introduction that so you're an artist who came here from the Eastern Seaboard, right? And you came to work in art education at the Anchorage Museum. And tell us, just to sort of orient us, I know we're going to dive into particular works that you've done at Bivy, but I'd love for you to just begin by telling us what kind of space you have been looking for or sought when you found Bivy as a place to share your work.
Sure. Well, that's a great question. So I moved to Alaska in 2016, and I've been living in Rhode Island. So I was living in Providence. I was working at the Rhode Island School of Design Museum. And so for those of you who might know, the Rhode Island School of Design, is quite a hotbed for artists. The faculty are really dynamic, and so there are a lot of spaces to show experimental work, conceptual work in Rhode Island. There are just a lot of spaces because there are a lot of artists who are eager to show and share their work. And there is an established kind of economy and set of expectations around that. So when I came to Alaska, I was very excited to learn about a new artistic community and think about different economies and ways of being that were really different from, what it means to have a gallery right next to the top art and design school in the nation, right? And to think about what does it mean to be really place-based, and think a lot about the communities that are here that are accessing work. So I don't know that I came to Alaska with expectations of what it would be like or what kind of space I would be showing in, but I knew I wanted to show. It's a big part of who I am as a person. So for me, it was really exciting to get connected with Simonetta at the early stages of Bivy and get to kind of see that space emerge and become a place where I think lots of different, as Simonetta was describing, lots of different kinds of ways of making and being creative can converge. And so that was really exciting for me about what Bivy can offer. And I'll just say Simonetta has been really supportive in showing work and helping think through, maybe more conceptual ideas and how to present them. So I think that's always really wonderful as an artist to be supported by the gallery that you're working with, to just kind of be able to bounce an idea off or consider a problem closely.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you so much for that little bit of orientation to where you're coming from. And let's look at some images of work that you done. Let's go back
Definitely.
to that shared screen.
So Simonetta, I think, were you running I think we had determined you were running these after all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
She's
I
gonna
can
share.
also do it.
So you're muted.
But I can just introduce, so the project that I thought I'd highlight at Bivy is just, I've had the opportunity to share my work in a couple of different ways and moments there, but I wanted to just highlight one particular exhibition that I had that I think kind of is emblematic both of my practice, but maybe also the kind of ways in which Bivy can hold a multiplicity of ideas and ways of making as an artist. So this exhibition, Rabbits Do Not Know What They Are, was based on my own childhood recollection of a poster that I had in my bedroom that actually takes a quote from a Jack Spicer poem. This is a footnote in the poem, Rabbits Do Not Know What They Are, is part of that footnote. And it's on this poster, and I created a body of white on white embroidery work. So it's harder to read in these images because it's white thread on white linen or cotton. And these kinds of ghost-like embroideries investigate these ideas of childhood recollection, but also thinking a lot about rabbits and ghosts and our histories and how we carry both these kinds of the nostalgia, the kind of a pet rabbit, which I did have growing up, and also how those transform and have their own mortalities as well. So the exhibition included things like this really large tablecloth. We can just probably paste through to the next slide, Simonetta. For the opening, I did a performance because for me, when I embroider or create installation or sculpture, it's always in dialogue with my work, kind of embodied work as an artist. And so for the opening, I played harmonium, and there were some vocalizations that were a part of that. We can move forward. And I also invited the audience to perform for themselves if they wanted to. So there was a large kind of sculptural ghost that I'd made out of a paper mache, and I invited audience members, I think there might be a couple of slides of this, we can move to the next one too, to put on a rabbit mask themselves and take this clear rosin baton and hit at this sculpture. And then inside were hundreds of rabbits' feet. You can also see rabbits' feet hanging from the ceiling. Those are real rabbits' feet that were harvested by a woman harvesting rabbits for meat in Montana, and a way for her to have output for those feet. She had to collect. I was looking for white feet, and so there are certain rabbits that, certain percentage of her rabbits that were white, so it took a little bit of time for those to accrue in relationship to her harvest practice. And then you can see there were both large and small scale embroideries, some on inherited tablecloths and inherited linens, as well as rosin hand sculptures that were in the shape of kind of like a shadow puppet rabbit that were direct castings of my own hand. And then the rabbit's feet, as they burst out of the sculptural piece, were available for visitors to take home as a memento from their experience in the show. You can move to the next slide, that's fine, Simonetta. And for at the conclusion of the show, I developed a 45-minute performance piece that was exploring this idea of these kinds of sheet-like objects called how to fold a fitted sheet. I don't know if you all are experts at folding fitted sheets, but I know that it can be a struggle. And it was a skill that it is a skill that my mother is quite adept at caring for linens. She's a textile artist as well, and I grew up on a sheep farm, so thinking about fibers and caring for textiles was really a big part of my childhood. So I was exploring this idea of kind of inside and outside, and the process of returning to, I could see this poster from my bed as a child, so returning to thinking about that kind of childhood space and then the kind of ghosts that we carry from those times, both beautiful and terrible, and using the kind of sheet as a metaphor. So I did a performance that involved music and folding the sheet, and yeah, it's fine to move forward. And then I worked with Flag Day Recordings, which is a record label. They reached out to me during the run of this show, not knowing about the show. They're on the East Coast and were interested in releasing a record with me at that time, or an album with me at the time. So produced a cassette along with a blind embossed book, which looks completely white here, but has a rabbit's foot embossed on it by Joe and Donna Carr. And the drawing of the hung rabbit is by Becca Olson, who is a wonderful artist in our community as well. And so I was able to release this tape through Flag Day, and generate this kind of lasting piece of a book, right, and a publication. And I think that's a big part of Bivy's kind of impetus, is also thinking about how the experiences of artists in that space can be remembered and shared beyond the moment of their showing. And I think the kind of printed matter that Bivy creates is a really unique part of that gallery, especially in our community, and kind of contributing to a library of what Alaskan artists are creating. And I think that might be it on my slides, or maybe there's one more, but we can certainly stop there. Yeah, it's just a close-up of the chapbook and then the cassette. Yeah, and I think we won't worry about sound, just because we've got lots more exciting artists to listen to. But there is you can listen online on my Bandcamp page or on Flag Day Recordings, and you can purchase the cassette from them.
Thank you. Hollis, would you paste in the link for folks to be able to follow up and listen in the chat? That'd be wonderful. Yeah. That's a lovely presentation and such an interesting body of work. I've cherished that little rabbit's foot I've got from that particular installation. And I loved that in the image that you presented, where we see the book, and it looks almost completely white, but yes, there's that rabbit, just that ghost of that rabbit in the back of that image. Just beautiful. Well, thank you so much. We're going to come around to sort of contextualize your practice and that of the other artists as we get toward the end of this presentation, but let's move on to Susan Scher's work. Thank you, Susan. Welcome, and it's so nice to have you with us here again. And I would like to ask you, as I did Hollis, what were you seeking as a uniquely different exhibition space in Anchorage in Bivy that you've been able to enjoy and to expand your practice through? Tell us about that, because you're an artist who moved here from New York City, after all, and that's just about as rare as somebody moving here from Italy. So,
oh, thank you, Asia, and thanks, Simonetta, for having me here today. I was very excited to meet Simonetta. People had been telling me about Simonetta and Bivy, and I think we met at an exhibition I had at the International Gallery in 2018. And what was exciting for me about the experience of meeting Simonetta and thinking about a show there, Simonetta came to my studio, and we looked through my archive and pulled out box after box of work that I had. And Simonetta had a really clear idea and a vision of how she wanted the exhibit to be, and she actually chose the work for the show. And it was unusual for me, because it's not probably the work I would think about exhibiting, but she had such a keen eye and a vision about it, that it was really a pleasure for me to kind of give that over as an artist, give it to her to really form. So I really appreciated that. In that process, we looked at a lot of sketchbooks of mine from the 80s and other kinds of traditional books that I'd made and used as sketchbooks. experiments with collage, painting, layering, the idea of series or sequencing images, and the book as the physical object. So the exhibit contained a lot of books that people flipped through. We also exhibited a series of posters that I had done and that were about doing nothing, based on a play by, now I'm losing my thought about that, but so the exhibit was called Doing, and the series of posters said either doing nothing or doing nothing not, or not doing. So it was kind of playing with those words of doing. And the other exciting part about working with Simonetta and Bivy is the uniqueness of the space and the opportunity and encouragement to create a new performance, which I did in this little alcove that Hollis mentioned. And it was such a pleasure to work in this tiny little defined space. And it was great for me. It kind of fit my body size. And so I was able to play in there and try out different things in relation to my proportions. So I created a new, I think it was a 5-minute performance, which we repeated several times during the run of the show. And that was really great. I loved that Simonetta had the shows more than 1 month. I think my show ended up being a little more than 2 months there. And that was wonderful because we could create programming that went with the show. So I did performances throughout the 2 months. Sometimes several sequential performances. Since they were only 5 minutes, we'd have one audience and then a break, and then another audience and a break. So it was a lot of fun, and I feel like Simonetta is just a very supportive curator who takes a keen interest, and just the unique space and unique curator really are wonderful to have here in Anchorage.
Fantastic. What a marvelous, vibrant collection of images. And it's so interesting to see, Susan, how you have, as a long-term yogi, incorporated that, form into your, visual vocabulary, along with performance and pieces I've known for, you to visit and reinvent for different spaces over time.
Yes. Oh, and the last slide here is again, excited. Simonetta mentioned the floral wallpaper, which has a lot of pinks and grays, and its parts are torn and deteriorated, and it's a really beautiful visual. And I pulled a piece that I had that imitated those colors, and it was something that most people didn't notice when they came in, that it was on the wall, incorporated into that wallpaper, because it blended so well. And that was really tickling to me, that I could camouflage a piece within that wallpaper.
Fantastic. That piece looks positively ticklish. Let's turn now to Ben Huff, who's on the lineup here of artists who've shown at Bivy in the past. And Ben, I just want to welcome you and thank you for joining us from Juneau. I know that you have been making ephemera and photography for some time, and I'd love for you to orient us to how you came to be connected with Bivy, and in what unique way Bivy, shapes the Alaskan landscape for artists today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Sitting here, sort of listening to Susan and Hollis and Simonetta, and sort of recalling, I think the beginning of discovering Bivy. But if I'm not mistaken, I think it was an article in ADN or maybe the press. Our mutual friend Brian Adams, I believe, made a wonderful portrait of Simonetta. And I remember reading the article or seeing a blurb about this new gallery and going to the website. And the thing that struck me, being an artist, a photographer, a bookmaker, who bookmaking is sort of central to my practice. And just seeing a picture of that back room at Bivy, and seeing, if I remember correctly, a book by a photographer I adore, Ron Jude, another one by Paula McCarthy, and seeing these really small books, artist books, some would call maybe esoteric books by like Roma Publications and Mac and Printed Matter. And I remember looking at these books on this shelf, they might even have been behind Simonetta or in a different picture, and thinking to myself, how on earth is she, not how on earth, but how I was so amazed and excited that there was an outlet in Anchorage or in Alaska for these books. Some of these books that I have in my own collection, some I just know online, publishers that I know are sort of hard to get a hold of, and books either in Europe or here in the US from really small publishers. And I just loved the fact that she was highlighting these books and stocking these books and having a conversation about this printed matter and ephemeral objects and books was just, it was inspiring to me. I sort of felt like there was a kindred spirit that I hadn't met that was in Anchorage, and I reached out to her and we started a conversation, and it just so happened that I was making a book of my own work in collaboration with an author here, Christy Nami Erickson, with my independent press, Icefog Press. And we started this conversation, and she, like Susan Nahala said, she's very open and excited and was interested in doing something new. And that started our sort of relationship and the work that we're looking at here, Latent Landscapes, that I showed there in 2018.
Yeah, so moving forward with these images, let's go to the next image and tell us a little bit about this body of work and why Bivy just really felt like the right place to share these images.
Yeah, so the project is it's actually, I'm still making the pictures, but it's the book I made in late 2017, early 2018, but it's a topographic work, a series of black and white pictures, all made at night, of these satellite dishes around Juneau. The term or the title Latent Landscapes is sort of a play on this idea of the latent image and this sort of, time before when the image is made to the time that we can see it either coming up in the fixer or downloaded on a computer of a digital image. And I was fascinated with the idea of latency within communication, of the time between a signal being sent and the signal being received. Each one of these pictures is made with a 4x5 large format image, and they're about 4-minute exposures. So I would sit in the landscape at winter at night and make these long exposures and sort of think about that information that may be coming through these satellite dishes and this sort of invisible language or information, and brought these images to my friend Christy here in town, gave her the images and let her sit with them for a while. And then she wrote this original prose piece, which isn't specifically about the images. They were just her writing reaction to the images. And I made the small artist book, Latent Landscapes, that we had there at the exhibition. But the thing that drew me to that space and seeing the images, and as a photographer, and a photographer that largely bases in landscape and portrait work that has some sort of narrative arc to it, and I'm always wanting to print large. In this space, it was a nice opportunity almost to print the photographs at the same scale as they were in the book, that really invite a viewer to come up and look closely to see detail, whereas so often it's sort of about standing back and taking them in. This decision to print or to have a photograph on one side and to have the Christie's text on the other side and frame them together is not, is not to say that it was a risk, but it is not something you see all that often. And it was something that I was a little like, oh, this might be sort of an interesting idea, but I'm not quite sure. And of course, Simonetta right out of the gate was, well, it's different. I've never seen that before. So that's reason enough to try it. And it was sort of experimental in that way. And I don't have the opportunity, or I haven't taken the opportunity, I guess, to show that often in Anchorage. And it was it was a perfect venue for the book and for a small room, sort of an intimate space for those pictures. And Simonetta was a wonderful partner in bringing it together. Yeah.
Thank you, Ben. That's wonderful and really interesting. I think that something that's coming up for me is just the value of Bivy as an intimate space to be able to connect and engage artists and audience in a way that's quite different from, say, a bigger space, whether it's a museum space or even a space at the scale of International Gallery or Bunnell. There's this intimacy that smaller space offers, which kind of charges the experience of the work differently. And I guess so that we certainly take this opportunity once you're with having you all together and Simonetta's thoughtfully prepared presentation, I'd like to pivot over to the School of Nonfunctional Studies and think about how these works are a part of that practice. Simonetta, thank you for sort of leading us there, and orient us, if you would, to what this means.
Yeah, may I say that I'm super thankful for Ben, Susan, and Hollis to be here and just like hearing them talk. They're very talented people, very generous people, and very grateful of Hollis' continued collaboration with us. Susan had this, even super grateful and humbled to be even able to look at her archive. And Ben has this own publishing practice that is known across the independent publishing network, which I, in fact, learned about Ben's at Print and Matter. So we have some amazing talent, and just we're super grateful that these people are collaborating with us at Bivy. But yeah, and Hollis, I'm just gonna say a few words then, since like you're co-founder, School of Nonfunctional Studies is open, informal, and experimental school started by Bivy. Hollis and I had a conversation, I remember probably in 2019, about like an idea of this sort of alternative, non-capitalist school where to experiment, and then we were able to finally kick it off in 2020. And in fact, it has been, perhaps, I want to say, in fact, the main activity of Bivy through 2020 and definitely through this COVID period. And I mean, Hollis, why don't you, otherwise it's only me talking. Do you want to say something about our statement and then maybe I can go through some of the slides. I don't want to.
Sure, I'll just be really brief. I think, for me, the School of Nonfunctional Studies is an expressive artistic project as well, that sort of engages with my own identity as a performance artist and thinking about kind of the performance of learning. And I think the school is experimenting with what that can mean and be. And there's a third co-founder, Alice, as well, who is in Italy. I'm not sure what time it is there, but so, I think each one of us brings our own artistic practice to thinking about this kind of collective creative project. And yeah, why don't you talk about what?
I think that, I think the foundation of the school is that what is non-functional in our society today is presence, process, awareness in a capitalist society. And so we said to ourselves, like in the kind of making of this project, that we might want to just do things just for the sake of doing them, process. And many of the courses and programs, we like the word programs better, I think, because obviously the school is very rhizomatic and process oriented, are very lighthearted and fun. And so some of the programs that we do is, for instance, we do this series of ongoing readings where we read a book from the beginning to the end all together on Zoom. We now have installed at Bivy an ideal classroom space for SNS, which is the acronym of School of Functional Studies, where we projected slides of non-functional prompts of slides by artists, which Susan, in fact, give us a slide for this installation. Many different programs, like here we're looking at a photograph of a screenshot, actually, because obviously most of the programs are online now, of a program that Alice and I co-led, and it was about slow food, and we had sort of a meditation practice, and Hollis is doing this series of tea services performances. I don't know if you want to say something about it, Hollis.
Sure, yeah, they're one-to-one performances, so just a performance made for one person. And they are around ideas of sharing tea. So the recipient receives a special blend of tea that I've made in response to a series of 3 questions that they've answered. And I create a unique performance and sound work for them and perform it live if they would like on Zoom. And they also receive a cake or some sort of recipe for making, and I've been able to send them both locally and then also perform for people all over the US.
Yeah. And at the really super vibey performances, I had the opportunity to see some of the documentation. Is really cool. And as I always mentioned, there's another co-founder, Alice, and she's an artist and publisher based in Italy. And so there are programs in Italy too. Pretty much same format, obviously, and lots of readings and things like that. But since we're operating a lot of in this online space, it works really nicely. And often when we gather with people for programs, it's a very diverse Zoom room of people. And here we're looking also at a photo of Hug, Stars, and Other Folds, which is an upcoming program of Susan's. You want to say something about it, Susan?
Sure. On February 24th from 6 to 8 p.m. Alaska time, I'm going to be showing how to do some different pleat folds, how to make a flexagon, which is a paper folded that hides and reveals various surfaces and is a constant motion, kind of an infinite way of looking at something, and some pop-ups as well. And we won't be tremendously goal oriented. We'll just be learning how to make some of these folds just to learn how to make them. And we'll be able to do it with what everyone has at home. So just copy paper, text and card weight copy paper, and scissors and glue, and a few other things. So hope some of you can join us.
Oh, wonderful. So all of this makes me realize it's sort of extremely novel and miraculous. How does Bivy survive, Simonetta? What does Bivy need to survive, and how is that working out for you, especially in COVID times?
Well, trivial response is money to that. No, I think that, I mean, to survive, we have all we need inside ourselves, I think. And I think it's good to close our eyes and remember that, and be able to rest in the present as much as we can, and know that we have what we need to survive. I think that throughout this period, the main activity of Bivy has been the School of Nonfunctional Studies, because we felt much more aligned with the period, and because we can operate online, and because it brings us together, at least from my perspective. And I think we are looking at definitely programming shows for the near future, but I wasn't particularly interested in doing that this year, because I think that it was good to sit down and just think about it, and not have a room with 4 people in a mask and a bunch of work on both ends that goes into the preparation of the show. Obviously, I have nothing against current openings or things like that. I'm just from a personal perspective, I know that there is a lot of work that goes into the preparation of a show, especially from the artist standpoint. And when we prepare a show, my goal is entirely to just kind of make it the best experience possible for the artist and their art and the visitors. And so I think that to survive, again, the space is kind of like in this limbo space now because there isn't a lot of traffic there. But the trivial answer I already gave right away. So that's one thing that we need to survive. And the other one, I think the most important, we have it. But I think it's good to be able to adapt and accepting change, because change is part of reality. And I think what's the beautiful part of this whole situation, I think that we've been confronted with, like, the reality of change has been here in our faces, and we try to make certainty for ourselves, but we torture ourselves when we do that. So I think that, yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe I'm just going on a rant right now. Why don't you?
No, I think it's clear, and I think it's really rich. Is there anything else that any of the artists would add, to what Simonetta is saying? I mean, in terms of what is essential for creative survival, even suggesting that it isn't a physical space, actually, and that's a fascinating and really important idea to consider.
I think something like this is also very value add, Asia. I think I'll speak for myself. I mean, so much about art and showing art and books is about, it's about the conversation, right? It's about ideas. It's about community, right? I mean, yeah, money makes it all work at the end of the day, but it's that support, it's that conversation, it's the community. And I think right now everybody's sort of looking out for each other to some degree. It's going to be what it's going to take maybe in the next year.
Absolutely. Well, let's pop out of the screen share and just into the room for a moment. And I just wanted to invite everybody who's present to, turn on their camera for a second and to acknowledge you and how much we appreciate you being in the room with us. As listeners and supporters, you're a really critical part of our audience. We're doing this together. And at this time, I just especially really want to thank the artists who've joined us: Ben Huff, Susan Scher, and Hollis Mickey, and most especially Simonetta and Livano for the incredible, generous, and sustained work of Bivy in Alaska, shaping the landscape in a really important and unique way.
Thank you, Asia.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
you,
all.
Simonetta.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming. Thank you, Simonetta, Asia, Hollis, Ben.
We'll be back next week. Holly Nordlund speaks about cultural resistance, revitalization, and her present projects, including public art acknowledgement through art, film, and traditional tattoos. 11 a.m. Alaska time, next Friday, February 19th. So take care and be well. Stay in touch.